Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you could join us for this webinar. As you know, Head Start programs are moving from indefinite budget periods to a 5-year project period. And there was an information memorandum that was issued on July 1st with the subject on the 5-year Head Start project period. And that IM discussed additional post-award requirements for all 5-year grants, and those requirements will be on the notice of award. The rationale for doing the new requirements were to promote priorities, increase grantee accountability, reduce risk in key areas, and offer resources and support. As we move to the next slide, we'll look at the 4 areas that will be on the notice of award. And it will say your organization must complete the activities outlined below with the identified time frames: school readiness, audit webinar, governance, and health and safety. And this goes back to the area talking about the promoting priorities. Certainly you can see that health and safety and school readiness have long been priorities of Head Start. We want children in healthy and safe environments, and we certainly want to see progress that children are making towards being ready for school. When we look at increasing grantee accountability, we're really looking at the governance section of the program, how the governing body and the policy council fulfill their roles and responsibilities. When we talk about reducing risk in key areas, we certainly are looking at the financial piece and the audits. Now again, these cross over so that when we were looking at reducing risk, it's not just financial. Those are, audits are generally, in finance is generally where we identify some risk areas, but it could be anywhere in the program. It could be in the health and safety area. It could be with governance. And then the other rationale behind it was to offer resources and support, and we have our TNTA system that is available to Head Start programs, and certainly the regional offices should be working in partnership with grantees so that all programs succeed in providing quality services to children and families. Now, on the notice of award, you'll see that there are timelines for those 4 conditions. The school readiness will continue to have calls throughout the year, and there'll be a minimum of 2 times with each grantee. The webinar will be at least once within the first year that will need to attend the webinar. Governance requirement is that within the first 90 days that you complete a screening of your governance within your program of the governing body and the policy council. And health and safety, you have 45 days to complete and then 15 days to upload the certification signed by the board chairperson into HSES, which is the Head Start Enterprise System. And we'll have further discussion by both Adia and Larissa on the specifics around that. We'll start with the school readiness. The grantees must participate in individual school readiness progress meetings with the Office of Head Start Regional Office. So Larissa, do you want to talk a little more about that?
Sure. Thank you, Russ. Good morning, everyone. To those of you on the West Coast, good afternoon. To those of you further east. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on each of the grant conditions. So the first one, school readiness. As you all know, we're in our 2nd year of implementing this process, and through it we've learned a great deal about the grantees' capacity and needs in defining school readiness goals and working to ensure their achievement. We've also learned a lot as federal staff about what school readiness means, how to talk about it, and how to support grantees in this endeavor. Including this language in the post-award requirements formalizes our ongoing efforts to ensure these conversations are occurring on a regular basis and continues to underscore the significance and priority the Office of Head Start is placing on ensuring the readiness of children we serve to succeed in school and in life. Implementation of the 5-year project periods moves us towards the next step in implementation of 45 CFR Part 1307, Policies and Procedures for Designation Renewal of Head Start and Early Head Start Grantees. Section 1307.3b speaks to grantees' responsibilities around establishing school readiness goals and taking steps to achieve them. Throughout the 5-year project period, regional staff will be assessing the quality of grantees' efforts around school readiness, their analysis of progress towards their goals, and whether they are making responsive quality improvements based on that analysis. As you know, the required school readiness meetings don't accomplish that assessment in themselves, but they do ensure an ongoing conversation and support both the grantees and the federal staff in understanding where we all are in this process, where we need to be heading, and determining where to focus in providing technical assistance and other resources. The key point here is that we're building towards something. Both the competitive and non-competitive funding applications require the grantee to share and discuss their school readiness goals. Oversight of the 5-year project periods will emphasize progress towards them.
The second condition is the audit webinar, and the condition reads, grantees must participate in an OHS-sponsored single audit webinar within 1 year of the start of the project period. Lucia, you want to talk some more on this?
Yep. The audit webinar is currently being finalized, and the initial airing will occur on Tuesday, July 30th and Thursday, August 1st. Both of the initial airings will include a live question and answer with the panelists, who include Ann Linehan, the Deputy Director of the Office of Head Start, Terry Ramsey, a Senior Technical Advisor to the Health and Human Services Office of Finance, Jeannie Chafin, Director of the Office of Community Services, Jim Bellinger, Director of Fiscal Operations at Dania International, Belinda Rinker, Senior Advisor to the Office of Head Start, and Jim Krimmel, an auditor and consultant from Pennsylvania who has worked extensively with Head Start programs. The presentations will be recorded and posted on the Early Childhood Learning and Knowledge Center for ongoing access to enable grantees to meet this post-award requirement. The format of the webinar will be a presentation by Jim Krimmel on how grantees can make the most of their audit process, followed by a panel discussion. The webinar will address why grantees need an audit and the type of audit they need, selecting the right auditor, preparing for the audit, navigating the audit process and avoiding common pitfalls, and concluding the audit and learning from the results. The panel will also discuss compliance requirements and common program findings, as well as audit quality issues. The webinar is intended for grantee board members and executive staff, and a save the date was sent out to those individuals as well as to federal staff 2 weeks ago. Once the webinar is posted on the Early Childhood Learning and Knowledge Center, it will be accessible to anyone interested in viewing it. The Office of Head Start is still working on a mechanism to enable us to track who views it for the purposes of confirming that grantees meet the post-award requirements.
The third requirement has to do with governance, and it reads, the governing body must complete a governance and leadership capacity screening within 90 days of the start of the project period. We know that effective governance is almost always a key of program success, but we also know that ineffective governance is always present with grantee failure. So we really want programs to take a focus on really looking at how the governing body functions, what their responsibilities and roles are, the same with the policy council, because we know that if governing bodies are functioning well, there's a greater chance of success for the program. There will also be more webinars on the 5-year project period as we move into that, and specifically around ongoing monitoring, ongoing oversight by the governing body, and management and policy council within programs. But for now, we'll focus on this requirement. Marissa?
An important point about the screeners for governance and for health and safety that we're sharing today is that we've developed them here at the Office of Head Start as a resource for grantees to access in implementing the post-award requirements. Use of these specific tools that we've developed is not required. However, if grantees choose to use other tools in implementing the requirements, they must ensure that the tools they use include the same elements at a minimum. Because the tools are built on the requirements of the Head Start Act and the performance standards, understanding those elements is pretty straightforward. The instructions accompanying the screener for governance suggest that a mixed group of board, policy council, and management team members complete the screener together, and this is how the screener is intended to be implemented by all grantees wherever possible. However, of note, discussions with the Office of Head Start leadership of Region 12, Migrant and Seasonal Head Start, has led to understanding that for some migrant programs, it may not be possible for the Board and Policy Council to accomplish this together within 90 days of funding, and that for others, 90 days may be too long of a timeline given the length of program operations. As appropriate, migrant and seasonal grantees will be afforded some flexibility in how this requirement is met. Migrant and seasonal grantees should work with their assigned program specialists to develop agreement for how this will be accomplished. This next slide is just a quick shot of the graphic that's on the cover page of the Governance, Leadership, and Oversight Capacity Screener. I wanted you all to see it and to be familiar with it so that you'll know that when you see this graphic on materials from the National TA Center for Program Management and Fiscal Operations, it's an indication that the material you're looking at is part of or tied to the Program Management and Fiscal Operations suite of resources for strengthening program governance. The next slide is just a screenshot of the beginning of the Governance, Leadership, and Oversight Capacity Screener, which is now available to you. So the sections of the screener include an introduction, instructions for use, the main body of it, which is all of the screening questions and space to indicate responses, and a summary page. The contents of the screener, the screening questions themselves, are built directly on the governance provisions in the standards and the Act. In reality, there's nothing new here. It's just a quick review of what's required to be in place. As such, experienced grantees in good standing should be able to breeze through the screener and note that everything is in place already. New grantees or grantees with previous governance deficiencies, findings, or concerns may take more time with the screener to confirm what is in place and to identify needs. Responses to each of the questions or points in the screener are marked in one of three categories, with the categories indicating whether the required practice is already currently in place, whether the required practice is in development and will be fully implemented within the first 3 months of funding of the 5-year project period, or whether the grantee agency needs assistance in understanding and implementing the required practice. Upon reviewing the completed tool, grantee management, board, and policy council members will hopefully discuss in depth any follow-up that's needed and develop plans to ensure that all of the elements are implemented as required. Federal or technical assistance staff can walk through the completed tool with grantees and discuss responses in any of the categories, and they can suggest resources to support the grantee in any areas that need strengthening. For now, there is no formal mechanism for submission of the completed governance screener. Grantees may want to share it with their assigned federal staff or TA providers, but this is optional and would be upon your initiation. Federal staff will check in with grantees as part of their ongoing oversight to discuss whether the screener has been completed and whether any follow-up assistance is needed. We may develop a mechanism and requirement in the future for the completed screener to be submitted by way of the Head Start Enterprise system, but we will make that determination at a future point in time. So next I'm going to share a little bit about technical assistance resources for strengthening governance in programs that do need and request assistance. First of all, federal staff and grantee specialists already have access to the governance materials that make up part of the Head Start A to Z toolkit for orienting new directors and leaders in Head Start and Early Head Start programs. In addition, the A to Z materials have been shared as a resource with participants in the Program Management and Fiscal Operations New Director Coaching Pilot. A to Z is a suite of materials which replaces and expands upon the former Head Start 101 package. It includes orientation to Head Start history, values, and requirements, as well as modules providing overview and tools for implementing each of the program management systems and for supporting data use in programs. Grantees can contact their regional office if they have an interest in or a need for these materials. Another resource in the Governance Suite is the Governance Readiness Tool, which is currently available through the Program Management and Fiscal Operations landing page on the Early Childhood Learning and Knowledge Center. The Governance Readiness Tool is designed to evaluate the strength of the governing body of a grantee agency and determine their readiness to oversee Head Start. It's focused on general best practices for nonprofit boards and is only minimally linked directly to the Head Start requirements. The tool is built around 15 research-based indicators of best practices for boards, and they're organized into 6 categories, which include structural factors, fiduciary responsibilities, strategic direction, leadership, community relations, and decision-making. The Governance Readiness Tool may be implemented independently by grantees, or the process may be facilitated by TA staff, federal staff, or others. One point of note about the Governance Readiness Tool, even if your agency doesn't have a need or interest for implementing the tool as a whole, there's an excellent resource list included which provides for in-depth learning opportunity related to each indicator of quality board practice. Next in the suite of governance resources under development by PMFO is the Governance Systems Builder. The System Builder is a planning tool for the grantee governance team. It's meant to support them in taking the results of the screening and/or the readiness tool and moving forward into building or strengthening their systems for ensuring that Head Start program governance requirements are met on an ongoing basis. The System Builder is meant to be implemented by the grantee governance team, which it would include the Head Start director and/or executive director, board members, policy council members, managers, and others at the grantee's discretion. Of course, it may also be supported by TA staff, and we anticipate that the System Builder will become available on the Early Childhood Learning and Knowledge Center by the end of this summer. Incidentally, over the course of the next year, PMFO will be developing system builders for several other program systems as well and providing those as resources. Another forthcoming resource is the governance training modules. These will be especially useful for orienting policy council members to the governance structure and functions and their role in it. Governance training modules will be self-paced for e-learning. They will be skills-based as opposed to standards-based. We anticipate that the content will include a section on understanding the various roles in governance, a section on asking the right questions when reviewing program reports and budgets, a section on strategic planning using program data to develop goals, and a section on working through challenges in relationships and communication and conflict resolution skills. More information will be forthcoming, and we anticipate posting these training modules this coming fall. Finally, at the direction of the Office of Head Start, Program Management and Fiscal Operations is working on a governance certification. The certification will provide an orientation for leaders of new Head Start grantee agencies by leading users through an overview of critical information. It's an online tool which will ultimately consist of 3 or 4 self-paced modules for a total of 1 hour of viewing time. The main components of the material covered will include a section we're calling Embracing Head Start, which describes some of our history, foundations, and the components of the program, and then sections on what Head Start governance is and the fiscal and legal responsibilities. The modules will be brief, but will identify and link to additional skill-building resources. We'll be designing a mechanism through which the grantee agency leaders who complete the tool will receive a certificate of completion. So as you can see, we're excited to bring forward a whole kit of governance strengthening resources for the Head Start community to support improvement in this critical priority area. I want to reiterate that our intent in mentioning these current and forthcoming resources today is to let you know about what exists to support next steps if your responses to the Governance and Leadership Oversight Capacity Screener indicate a need for follow-up to strengthen governance in your program. You can use the phone number or email address on this slide, also listed on the home page for the TA Center for Program Management and Fiscal Operations, to contact PMFO if you have questions about these or other management systems resources. Now Ross will introduce the fourth condition.
Thanks, Alyssa. And I want to just reinforce for programs the importance of the governance section that we just went over. We really do believe that effective and efficient governance structure within programs providing ongoing oversight is crucial in the delivery of quality services throughout your program. The fourth condition now is just as important, and it's one that's received a lot of attention lately, and it has to do with health and safety. It specifically reads, the grantee must complete a health and safety assessment of each center and or family child care home where services are provided within 45 days of the start of the program or school year. So Adia Brown will talk about this section.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Adia Brown. I'm the monitoring lead here at the Office of Head Start. And I just want to say good afternoon and good morning to all of the 1,400 guests that we actually have on the line. We're so glad to have so many people here that are interested in this conversation. So I'm going to talk to you about the health and safety screener. And the first thing that I want to tell you is that we have the screener and it's available. You can find it on the Early Learning Childhood Knowledge, ECLIC, as we call it. You can find it there. However, we want to also let you know that the tool is optional. We know that a lot of programs actually use their own screening tools to find out about health and safety and to make sure that their programs are actually safe for children. So if you're already using a tool, that tool is appropriate to use and you can use that one. But you must know that the tool that you decide to use must actually include all of the elements of the tool that's on eClick. So you may want to do a little crosswalk between the tool that you use and the tool that is available just to see whether or not you have all the information that you need to ensure that safety is appropriate for the children in your program. As with the governance screening, we understand that migrant and seasonal programs are a little bit different. You start at different times. You have many different places. You may be spread out across states, so they're not close together. And we also know that migrant and seasonal programs open at different times during the program year. So we've had some conversations with the migrant and seasonal RPM. You guys who are out there and on the call for migrant and seasonal know that Sandra Carton, and she was very helpful in helping us to understand that process. And we're continuing to work with her to really understand migrant and seasonal and how we can apply the tool and when it is that you will actually need to submit them. So like the governance screener, you want to work very closely with your program specialist and ensure that you really understand when your screener should be submitted for your program. So the next thing that I want to tell you about the health and safety tool is that the grantee's governing body must submit to OHS a signed certificate of compliance with all applicable health and safety requirements within 60 days of the start of the school year. So this one is a little bit different from the governance screener, where you don't actually have to submit something. In this case, you'll see later on in the slides that there's actually a certification that the governing body needs to submit. You'll do the screener within 45 days, and then you have an additional 15 days to actually submit your certification to the Office of Head Start. Now you may be wondering, what is that certification all about? The certification is really about your governing body, and that includes both the board and the policy council, or the tribal council if you're an AIN program. It's really about your program attesting to the fact that you have a safe environment for children. So your program staff will do the screeners, but the board and the policy council must really understand the outcome of those screeners and any program needs that you may have. At the end of that, then the board and the policy council are actually submitting a tool that says that you've completed the screener and that you really understand the health and safety of your program and you know that it's good and that things are really working for children in your program. So the next shot here. This is a screenshot of sort of the first page of the Health and Safety Screener tool. It looks very familiar to the governance tool, so when you see them, you want to make sure that you have the right tool in hand because they look similar. But this one is the front page of that screener tool, and you'll find that on eClick. So what does the Health and Safety tool really do? Well, this tool, it doesn't actually include all of the performance standards. It really focuses on the things that we think are immediate indicators of potential threats to the children's health and safety. So when you're filling out the tool, one of the things that we want people to really be aware of is that this tool doesn't cover all of the performance standards. It doesn't cover all of the health performance standards. But what it does cover are the things that we think that you definitely should take a look at early on in your program year to really ensure that you understand safety for children. The agencies, directors, and governing bodies should ensure that all health and safety requirements are met in the agency. So even if the tool that we've actually provided for you doesn't cover everything, it's still your role to make sure that you're meeting all of the standards as they relate to health. So this is so important, we say it again on this other slide. We really want folks to understand that the tool is not inclusive of all the regulations. So when you're doing something like your self-assessment or when you're really doing your regular daily health checks, you want to make sure that you're checking all of the regulations in your program. This tool is really about checking the indicators that health and safety may be a problem. The agency must ensure that they comply with all of the performance standards. So you want to make sure that you do that. So when the Health and Safety Screening Tool was created, and lots of people here at the Office of Head Start really worked on that tool, one of the intentions for the tool was to make sure that the tool had really simple directions, that it was easy for grantees to understand, and that you could follow the tool and really do it without a lot of burden on your program. The certification form was actually, it's also very simple. It's easy for you to fill out. It only includes a certain number of people, the board, the policy council, the tribal council, the Head Start director, but they wanted to make sure that these were easy tools for you to use and be able to complete them in the 45-day time frame. There's also a center and site cover page. So that center and site cover page is actually because the tool has to be used at each one of your centers. And the cover page is actually there so that you know that you went out and visited all the centers and the sites that you have. So if you have family child care or if you have other types of sites, it's really important to make sure that you see them all. And in the case of home-based programs, you want to make sure that for home-based programs, if you use socialization sites, that you ensure that you do a health and safety checklist at those sites as well. The screening tool is actually a checklist, so it's very easy for you to use. There are yes/no boxes on the tools, and there's spaces for you to be able to write down if you have any problems in the agency. So what does the tool include? Well, the tool is actually there to help you understand your environments. So one of the things that the Office of Head Start really thinks is important is for you to understand whether or not all of your environments are actually safe. Those environments include your site, any site that children are at, making sure that paint is safe or that your playgrounds are safe. So you want to make sure that when you do this screener or your own screener, that you're looking at the environment. The tool also looks at health and safety procedures because just as the environments are important, your health and safety procedures are important. So it's important to really understand whether or not children are getting what they need as it relates to health and safety. One of the things that the Office of Head Start has really seen more problems in over the course of the last few years is supervision. So the tool actually focuses on supervision and really helps you to look at whether or not you have all of the policies and procedures and systems in place to ensure that children are supervised at all times. And that includes supervision in the classroom, on the playgrounds, and on the buses. Supervision is everyone's responsibility, and so we want to make sure that programs really take a look at supervision and understand that that's working in their program. The tool also helps you to look at transportation. Transportation has always been a really important part of Head Start safety, and so we want programs to always really look at this again and make sure that you have all the safety procedures that you need. This includes all the things like, not only the things like making sure that children are in restraints and that things are stored on the bus properly or that the bus has all the equipment that's needed, but it also includes making sure that the staff who are on the buses actually meet all the requirements to make sure that children are healthy and safe. So how does the regional office really play into your screening tool? Because this is something that you need to submit, the regional office will actually follow up with the grantees to ensure that you completed the health and safety screening. They're there to really make sure that in this process that you have someone to help support you when you find, for both things, when you find things that are really positive with health and safety, you may want to share those with the region, and also to share things where you may need some additional support. So the regional offices will give you a call, they'll make sure that you completed those screenings, and they'll be looking forward to getting your certification of health and safety. The regional office staff will talk with the grantees about the outcome of their their screener, any issues that they have, and how the grantee plans to correct anything that they find. This is a really important part because the tool is actually designed to be interactive. So it's not really just a tool that you go around and do at all of your sites, but it's an interactive tool to actually help you with your performance in the area of health and safety. So OHS really does expect that when grantees find that there are health and safety problems in their agency, that they really, and they put any children at risk, that you address those immediately. If you need some support from your regional office, it's definitely appropriate to give them a call and find out and talk to them about the supports that you need. But at the end of the day, it's really the agency's responsibility to make sure that all health and safety items that need to be addressed are actually corrected and taken care of. This is really one of the important parts about the tool. So Marco Beltran, who is the lead here for the National Center on Health, was very helpful in putting together a list of items that can be helpful for you as you think about health and safety in your program. One of the things that he has is something that's called compliance with care, and it's a crosswalk between the Head Start performance standards and caring for our children. You can find all of these tools on eClick. And the National Center for Health developed a crosswalk that provides programs, recommendations for quality health and safety practices and procedure. Head Start health managers and staff may use this easy tool to find connections between the Head Start program performance standards and caring for our children, National Health and Safety Performance Standards, 3rd edition. This tool is really helpful because where the Head Start performance standards can be broad, the stepping stones really can be helpful in helping the program really focus in on some of the details around health and safety. The next resource that's available are Tips for Families, the Tips for Family series, Tips for Health Manager series. These are 2 tip sheets that are available to you. And the first one, the Tips for Families, is about child safety and injury prevention is the focus of this fact sheet for Head Start health managers working for families. It provides easy tips families can use to ensure their children's health and safety at home, outside, in the water, and in a car or a truck. So these are tools that you can actually use with families. The second tool is Tips for Health Managers. This fact sheet helps Head Start health managers provide important information to program staff on the National Center for Health identified health priorities, child safety and injury prevention. It provides concrete information and strategies staff can use to help children stay safe in a variety of program settings. So those 2 things really help you to look at your settings, and we really recommend that folks take a look at those tip sheets and use them as appropriately. The next resource is Active Supervision, a referenced fact sheet from the Head Start National Center on Health. Active supervision is the most effective strategy for creating a safe environment and preventing injuries in young children. Educators from all over the world use this strategy to make sure that children of all ages explore their environment safely. Each program can keep children safe by teaching all educators how to look, listen, and engage. And I know recently we went out to some programs and really talked about active supervision and how that's definitely helpful in making sure that they keep children safe in their programs. The next resource is What is Injury Prevention? Child safety is one of Head Start's top priorities. When programs and families use injury prevention strategies to promote child health and prevent child injuries, children are more likely to be safe and engaged in learning. This resource guide defines injury prevention using information and strategies from national organizations whose promotion efforts have reduced child injury nationwide. Find guidelines, websites, campaigns, fact sheets, and resources for families that will help your program use research-based strategies to prevent injuries. And the next resource is 10 Actions to Create a Culture of Safety. This resource guide describes 10 actions that programs can take to promote a culture of safety. By carefully integrating each action into plans, health managers assure that the process of re-envisioning a culture of safety in the program is accomplished. Like the other centers, the Head Start National TA Center for Health is also available for you as a grantee. This slide provides you with information about how to reach that center and how to actually get to more resources if you need them as they relate to health. So we hope that all the grantees out there, all 1,400 of you, will definitely take advantage of the resources that we shared today and use the numbers as you need to really help make sure that health and safety is a strong system in your program.
Before we address some of the questions that have been submitted, we do want to thank you for your important role that you play in ensuring that children in Head Start are safe and that they are getting the best early childhood services this nation can offer. And when we say the best early childhood services, that can only occur when parents and families are actively and meaningfully engaged in their child's development in the program. So we thank you for participating on our presentation of the call and now, or of the webinar, and now we'll move to answer some of the questions that have been raised.
Okay. Santia, can you move us back to slide number 20? One of the things that came up in the chat box was folks wanted to see the information again for how to contact PMFO. And I'm going to take a crack at the first couple questions that came up. Several people asked about a printout of the PowerPoint or getting a copy of the slides, so I just want to reiterate that this presentation will be available on the Early Childhood Knowledge and Learning Center. It's not there yet today, but it will be available there soon. One of the questions was about whether these requirements are for new grantees, and I just want to make the clarification that these requirements pertain to all grantees entering a 5-year grant period or a new 5-year grant. So not just folks that are brand new to Head Start, but anybody entering a 5-year grant. There was a question about whether the resources and screeners will be in Spanish. OHS is working on some of these things. It's safe to say that the screeners, because they are shorter, will be available sooner, but they are not available at this time. And many people have asked about locating the screeners online, and we are working on getting that information for you more directly before we conclude the call. Another question that came up was whether this process replaces the current annual self-assessment. The answer to that is no, it does not. And one clarification that I want to add with that is that these, the grant conditions apply in the first year of a 5-year grant period. They are not expected to be repeated during every year. A grantee certainly could do them again if they find it beneficial, but the post-award requirements apply specifically to the first year of funding of the 5-year cycle. Another question was whether these conditions apply to grantees only or also to delegate agencies. It is the grantees who are responsible directly for ensuring that the conditions are met. However, the activities should be carried out in ways that incorporate both the grantee agency and also any delegates if they have delegate agencies. What's come up?
So actually, there was one question that had from a tribal program, and where they were asking about the delegate, where they delegate the grant to a CAP agency. At that point, as Larissa was just saying, it would be the responsibility of who we fund. In this case, would be the tribe and tribal council for ensuring that as they, whatever delegate they are working with, are in compliance with the notices that were on the, the conditions that were on the notice of award.
Okay. And one more that I'd like to take from earlier is that someone asked about whether there would be consequences for boards who don't participate in the training certificate process. That was in reference to the forthcoming resource, the training and certification from PMFO, that was not in relation to these current grant conditions. And there was additional comment that indicated the spirit of the question was someone's enthusiasm for ensuring that their board is more informed and more accountable. But there is not, as that is a TA resource and not a grant condition, no, there is no consequence at this time for not participating in that training. Bear in mind, though, that that is separate from the fact that there is a general requirement in the standards and the Act that boards and policy councils receive training on an annual basis. It doesn't have to be that specific training resource provided by PMFO.
Some of the other questions that came up is the grantee's auditor required to participate in addition to the grantee on the audit webinar? And last year or this past year, we did a webinar for auditors. They certainly would be encouraged to sit in, but this one is looking at the grantee level individuals, executive director, board chair if they wanted, fiscal officer, but there's nothing to say that the auditor could not or should not participate. And then it says, if we have not received an invitation to participate in the audit webinar, how can I register? That will be sent out, well, actually.
The notice about the audit webinars went to grantees. It went to executive staff, such as executive directors and Head Start directors. It went to fiscal officers, and it went to board chairs. That's the intended audience for the first airing because we have limited capacity. So if you didn't receive it, you will be able to shortly after that access the webinar on eClick and watch it at your convenience.
So there's a couple of more questions that came in, and we're excited to get all these questions. This is awesome. One of the things that folks really want to know is about the health and safety screener. One person writes, our NOAA indicates the health and safety screener needs to be completed within 15 calendar days of the completion of the assessment. However, the webinar indicates it's due 60 days after the start of the school year. Which timeline is correct? That's a great question. So one of the things is that we give you 45 days to actually complete the screener. So you get that entire 45 days to do that. And then the next thing is you get 15 days from the time that you complete the screener to submit it. So hopefully that helps with that question for you.
Then there's a few more questions that we'll try and address on the audit. One is, there's a couple that are talking about if our grant year starts September 1, do we need to participate in the July 30th audit webinar? And I mean, we would always encourage that programs to participate in the webinars that OHS is being put on, but there will be more than one audit webinar during this the next 12 months. So if you cannot make that one, then there will be another one to participate on. And
you'll have access on eClick after that time. So in terms of the timeline, if that is not convenient because of when you're starting, you will have flexibility about when to view it later. For those of you who have asked about accessing the two screeners, I just received information. What we have been told is that they will be in the newest resources widget on the left side of the eClick homepage within the hour from now. And they also will be in the future, I believe not today, but shortly, on a 5-year project period page under Head Start and Grants.
Then there's a question that has, is the governing body the agency board of directors or the policy council? The governing body, as described in the Head Start Act, is what is commonly referred to as the agency board of directors or the tribal council. What we're looking at in terms of the governance screener, though, is looking at items that go with the governing body and the policy council. So we actually see governance being, in some ways, a three-legged stool. That is the governing body, the policy council, and the management of the program. So then we have a question. How will we know if we qualify for a 5-year grant? You'll be notified both through the Office of Head Start, the regional, and then the regional office. If you've met any condition, the 7 conditions in 1307, if so, then it means that you will be in the competition process. You'll also be notified if you did not reach meet any of the 7 criteria, in which case you would be going into renewal, and your 5-year process would, project period would start at your next grant year.
There's a question about whether within 1 year applies to the pre-award or if it must be post-award. That would be within 1 year of your date of funding, so the date of receipt of the notice of award. There's also another question about if you have a delegate agency, should the grantee and delegate undertake this together or should they do it on their own? That would be at your discretion as long as the grantee ultimately is responsible for ensuring that it's been done meaningfully throughout your program.
And just to clarify one thing I said before, because there was a question that came up, was does the 5-year project period begin with your next grant year? And the answer is if you are in renewal, in other words, you did not meet any of the 7 criteria and you get the letter saying that you did not meet any conditions, yes, it would start at your next project year. But again, that would be when the grant was issued.
So there's one that's interesting there that says, does this process replace the full federal reviews, and will there be a modified review? Well, for the person who asked that question, no, this process does not actually replace the full federal review. The federal review will actually happen in the 3rd year of your 5-year grant, and so that really doesn't change. This process is really something that happens in the 1st year of your grant. So you do this in the 1st year of your grant, and it's a screener. It's really to really help you. The screeners that we've introduced are really there to help you really understand sort of the groundwork of your program. So they're 2 different processes.
Again, there was a question and a comment around the Head Start Act and the governing body, and that saying that the Head Start Act defines the governing body as the Board of Directors or Tribal Council. I think that's what we said before. But the question is why we involve in Policy Council, because when you look at governance, again, it's a makeup of governance is also, Policy Council is also in Section 642 under governance. So it's a combination of, it's not just one group or the other, it's a combination of both, of how you're working together. Policy Council has the roles and responsibilities around planning, and so they should be involved in that process. Now, it is up to the governing body, the chairperson, again, governing body can also be Tribal Council, that they would be in charge or make sure that the screening was completed. The screener was completed, but it was not excluding Policy Council.
There's a question about whether there's a corresponding governance readiness tool for grantees that are not nonprofits. There is not a separate tool for other types of grantee agencies. However, I would suggest that agencies of any type, any auspice, it's still worth a look because there are a variety of concepts that would apply to different types of agencies and also a variety of resources that are linked to it where you may find more of what you're looking for.
There's lots of questions about when you have to turn in the health and safety screener. Do you have to do it at the program year or do you have to do it during the school year? And I think that in this PowerPoint presentation we actually referenced both, and that's because it depends on when your PYB date or when your funding year date actually begins. So you may have to talk specifically with your regional office to determine when you need to submit your screener, because people have different funding year dates and different times when their funds start and when their school year starts. So we'll make sure that we clarify that. We'll put it up on eClick and make sure that people are definitely aware of exactly when they need to submit the certificate.
We have a question that where a program just received their notice of award for the program year beginning 7/1. However, the document was signed on 6/25, and it states the project period is indefinite. Does this apply to our grant? If your project period is indefinite and you're not starting a 5-year project period, no, it does not. It only applies to those grantees entering year 1 of a 5-year project period.
So someone said, am I hearing this right? There will not be a monitoring review until the 3rd year. So for 5-year grants, the monitoring, the way that the cycle works is that you are monitored in your 3rd year of your grant. So your cycle that you're currently on is going to change a little bit, and we do the full review in the 3rd year of your grant. However, there are many other things that we do throughout the course of the 5 years to ensure that grantee operations are actually functioning well for each of the Head Start programs. So we do the monitoring review in the 3rd year, and this actually meets the regulations of having a triannual review for all programs.
What we're also looking at is, and obviously if it's a brand new grantee that's has just entered into year 1 of a 5-year project period, they will get a end of the first a review after the completion of the first year of operation. For those programs that for the other programs entering year 1, we're looking at other indicators that allows the Office of Head Start or the regional office to engage the grantee and to help determine whether or not another review or some other type of review would be needed. But we're actually looking at that as part of the ongoing oversight piece of a 5-year project period.
We're starting to get a bunch more general questions about the 5-year project period. The first one that I see here is somebody wants to know whether it's optional to move into the 5-year project period. Ross, did you want to say anything about that?
No, I mean, I guess if you took it down to the nth degree, optional means if you're offered or you're able to either move into a 5-year project period, but your grantee does not want to, you would no longer be a Head Start grantee, because we're entering in all Head Start programs will be moving into a 5-year project period, either through recompetition because one of the criteria in 1307 was met by that grantee, or you didn't meet it, and you will be informed that you may have that you'll be getting a 5-year project period renewal.
Another question says, we know we'll be recompeting for funds for grant year 2014. If we're awarded the grant, will we need to complete the screening and governance tools? Yes, you will, because you'll be moving into a 5-year project period at that time. Another question, will a grant application be required each year or only the first year of the 5-year project period? You will complete a grant application in every year of the 5-year project period. The first-year grant is similar to what grantees are accustomed to as the more extended first-year grant. Competing grantees will respond to the funding opportunity announcement. Non-competing grantees will receive a funding guidance letter. The content of either type of application is fairly similar. They are more extensive than what you may be familiar with from the past. There's a strong emphasis on the program's goals in school readiness and other areas and your plans for moving towards accomplishment of those goals. The grant applications for years 2 through 5 will be somewhat streamlined and will be more like a progress report where you share information on where you are in meeting the goals and working towards the goals identified in the first-year application.
And again, we'll have more or other webinars that we'll be looking at more of the specifics of the 5-year project period and the goals over each year and over the 5-year project period.
Somebody wrote a really simple question. Does a new CFO need to be approved by the regional office? And the answer is yes. All key staff members have to be approved by the regional office.
There's another question asking about the timeline for meeting these requirements based on where someone is in their current 3-year cycle. Just a clarification that these post-award requirements apply to grantees entering the 5-year cycle. So if you are not at that point yet, you do not have to meet these requirements at this time.
There are lots and lots of questions about when you're going to have your full monitoring review. I'll try to state it as clearly as I can another time. The way the 5-year process works at this time is that if you have received a 5-year grant, or you do receive a 5-year grant, we review those 5-year grants. We have the full review cycle is the 3rd year of your 5-year grant. So if you were on a cycle before under your indefinite grant, then that grant cycle has actually changed. So you may have a shift in when your review actually occurs. The review that you're going to have is going to occur in the 3rd year of the 5th year in the 3rd year of your 5-year grant cycle.
There was a question from looks like a tribal program. They asked if they had an IHS inspection this summer, is it considered compliant with the Head Start standards, and can we submit that as our screener tool if we have the report? That would be one that I'd actually suggest that you be in conversation with your regional office and the regional program manager, Captain Bayless. We believe that it will suffice, but there may be differences that we want to just be sure that we're consistent on our answers on that. So I would encourage you to have that conversation with your regional office.
Someone's asking, will it be a simple 1-page document that will tell us what we need to do, when we need to do it by, and and where to find the screener tools? This would be very beneficial. We like that as a statement, and that document is not available yet, but we can certainly work here at the Office of Head Start to try to create a document like that if grantees feel like they need that. Another question is, will program instructions related to approval of executive director and fiscal directors be updated to reflect the DIA statements that all, I'm glad you guys know my voice, that all needs to be approved by the regional office? That requirement is actually a program performance standard. So the performance standard says that you have to have all key staff approved by your regional office. The process for how you have those staff members approved is actually done at the regional level. So if you're not sure about how to do that, then I would recommend that you contact your regional office.
Then there's a question, can you start the certification process when in recompetition status? No, you'd wait to see if you were successful with recompetition and you got your the notification of award, which is your grant award.
Kathleen says, I'm assuming that since we are in the 2nd year, 3rd month of our 5-year contract, that we will have more time than the deadline stated. We were awarded the grant in July of 2012, May 1st grantee. For some grantees, this call is a little it's a little off schedule. There are some grantees who have already received a 5-year grant, and so for each of you who have actually done that, yes, this is a different timeline for you guys, and you should work with your regional office around what needs to be submitted.
Right. I think in that example, although it's not as part of the question, that particular grantee was probably or may have been a successful replacement grantee, and they did enter their 5-year project period basically in the summer of 2012. So yes, you would work with your regional office on that.
Okay. Most likely because these are newer requirements, and you were a replacement, most likely were a replacement grantee. Some of these things you may not have to actually submit.
There's a question, would you define the difference between program year and fiscal year? Your program year is when your grant period starts. The fiscal year is really a federal fiscal year, and that starts on October 1 of every year is the federal fiscal year, but your program year starts.
There's actually a couple of years that people need to think about. You have your school year, and that's when your kids actually enter into the program and you actually start providing services. And I think that's what people are actually asking us about. Your program year is what we call your PYB date, or it's the date that you actually receive your federal grant. So some people are 10-1, some people are 6-1, some people are 1-1. That's your program year begin date. That's what we call that. And then there's the fiscal year, which is always for us, the federal fiscal year starts in October of each year. So there's 3 dates that you have to be aware of. But I think where the confusion is coming in is that folks are trying to figure out, when do you need to send in your health certification? Is it at the program year when you get your PYB, which is the date of your actual award? Or is it because some people can start in November or December or January with their PYB? Or do you need to do your health certification at the beginning of the school year? Because we all know that what you want to certify is that kids are safe when they enter for each school year.
There's a related question asking what's the difference between the grant period and project period. I'm going to take a stab at this, and somebody's going to make a face at me around the table here if I get it wrong. Project period is the 5-year period. It's the full project for the 5 years. Grant period is you have 1-year grant periods within the project period. That corresponds to the funding that you get 1 year at a time. There's also a question about when grantees should receive a letter notifying them that they can apply for the 5-year grant. For grantees that are eligible to apply non-competitively, you should get your funding guidance letter 6 months prior to what would be the start of a new period, similar to how it always have been, so that you have a couple of months to get your application together before it's due to the regional office, and then they have a couple of months to review it and negotiate any clarifications with you prior to the funding date. There's another question: how would I find out who was sent the link for the audit webinar? The answer to that could be found in your on your grantee page in the Head Start Enterprise System. Whoever is listed as your executive director, fiscal officer, and board or tribal council chairperson, they would have received that email.
There's also a question that, where'd it go? Oh, new grantees will still have a federal review in year 2, correct? Yes, for brand new grantees, you will have what we call a first-year review, or that's what the Head Start Act refers to, which is done at the completion of year 1, which would be your year 2. So yes.
So I'm going to take a stab at this question that just keeps popping up in the chat box about the program year and the school year, and as it relates to when you need to submit the different tools and the screeners. So the intention of the tools and the screeners are so that they all are related to the NOAA. So your NOAA you get during your program year, for your program year. So no matter when your program year starts, it may be December, January, March, it may be September or August. You get your notice of award, and then that is it tells you when your program year date begins. All of these requirements are related to your receipt of your notice of award and your program year date. So folks may say, well, I don't have children in session at a certain time. The 45, 60 days that you need to submit these are all related to your program year date. You can still really determine whether or not a program has a system of safety even when children are not available in the program. So the idea is that the board and the policy council are actually doing the screeners that relate to health and safety and to governance to determine whether or not the program is ready for children to attend. For programs who have a program year begin date that starts closer to the beginning of the school year, we want to give those programs more, give them the 45 days or the 60 days from the school year, because you do have children in session and you can fill out the screener as it relates to those children. So I know that people keep asking those questions because you're trying to get a solid answer about when your date is. My best answer for that is that this is all related to your notice of award and your program year begin date. That may start at many times in the program for different agencies. But the other thing is that I want to reiterate for folks is that it's really best to work with your regional offices around these particular items.
There's a question, can we carry over funds from one year to another within the 5-year grant period or the 5-year project period? And the answer to that would be technically yes, that may be a possibility. However, it would be subject to the same conditions as it always has been in terms of that you cannot simply carry over unspent funds in a general way, but if there are unfinished mandates of the prior grant period, you can apply to your regional office with the appropriate information to hopefully be allowed to do that. A second piece to this that the question did not ask, but which is important, is that you cannot carry funds from one 5-year project period into the next.
There are a few questions around, again, when will we be moving from indefinite to 5-year project periods, and what's the advantage of going to getting a 5-year grant? Well, the advantage of getting a 5-year grant means you continue to be funded. When that will occur is once you receive notification from the Office of Head Start that you that you did not meet one of the conditions of 1307. That would mean you're automatically eligible for renewal, and your next grant year would start your 5-year project period, would be the first year of your 5-year project period. If you met one of the conditions, then you have to go through competition, as is described in the Head Start Act and 1307 describes. But again, the only way you continue to get funding to move from an indefinite to a 5-year project period is when notified by the regional office that you're eligible for renewal or you must recompete.
Somebody put a resource in the chat box for us for our online educational classes. So I just want to thank that person and make sure that they know that we saw their resource, and we will take note that that resource is available. We always like when grantees provide us with something. Another question says, when is the PC expected to be in place for new grantees? We will not have all sites in operation until September. We were previously a delegate agency and previously had a delegate agency policy council. I think the best thing to really help grantees think about is the Head Start performance standards, and it says as soon as you can in the beginning of the program year, you should establish a policy council. So we don't have an exact date for when that policy council should be established, but the law actually regulates that you do it very early in the beginning of the program year. So you want to think about starting up and having your policy council kind of ready to go.
And if you're a new agency entering in, even as a delegate, but you're successfully moving to it, I think in your application you had to describe how parents were being involved in helping with the development of the application and how they would be involved in as the program was starting up. So those parents can be involved even though they're not officially elected on the policy council until, as Adir was mentioning, you have you followed the performance standards that indicate or describe how policy councils are set up and formed.
Okay, so someone's asking for us to go back to a slide, so we'll try to do that. They're asking for us to flip back to slide 31 because that was a missed slide, so that's really helpful to do. And there's another person, again, asking about the full monitoring review process. I think the best thing for us to do is that we will develop some written information about the monitoring review and when they occur and how they work for the 5-year grant period. I think that there's a lot of interest in that topic, and so we'll make sure that there's a resource available so that grantees really understand when they will be reviewed again. One of the things that we're talking about is the very first 5-year grant. So this one that you're in right now will definitely review you in the 3rd year. That doesn't necessarily apply to your next 5-year award. So we'll make sure that folks are actually very clear about when they're going to have their review. And I also want to make sure that folks are clear that during your 5-year process, there are other elements that we are planning to use to make sure that we understand that your performance is being maintained across the course of the 5 years.
You should now be able to see slide 31 for the person who asked. We'll leave it up there for a little bit, and then we'll move on. There's a question that says, we received our 5-year non-compete designation letter, and our NOAA for our upcoming year says first year of 3-year period. Will we receive an updated NOAA with the extra 5-year requirements and the new grant number? What I would suggest on that is you contact your regional office to make sure that, rather than us answering here without all of the background information, that would be a question your regional office can answer for you.
You know, we have great helpers who help us with these questions, and so for the person, I answered the question about the Policy Council, and I've been provided with the performance standard to help you, and so that performance standard is 1304.50A3, and that helps you understand when you need to establish your Policy Council. Thank you very much, Bridget, for sending that.
There's a question, does the Office of Head Start have a checklist for the 5-year grant applications? There is not a checklist per se. However, the funding opportunity announcement for the competitive grants outlines all of the pieces that you need to put in place in your application, and the funding guidance letter for non-competing grantees provides that same information.
There's a question that came in that talks about, we are scheduled for a review in our next federal fiscal year. When will we be eligible for a 5-year grant? What will happen is, as we do about a third of the programs that we review each year, those programs who we reviewed in this fiscal year, 2013, will be Office of Head Start will look at and determine whether or not they meet that cohort of programs that we reviewed, about probably 400 or so, will be reviewed and looked at to see whether they or not they met any of the 7 criteria. In other words, if you had a deficiency that was identified, then you know that you will need to recompete, because that's one of the 7 criteria in 1307. But if you did not meet any of that criteria, then you will be notified that you that you're eligible for renewal, and then that would start your 5-year project period at the next program year. If you're being reviewed in this upcoming year between October 1 and September 30th, October 1, 2013, September 30th, 2014, then it will be after that review year that that cohort of programs would be looked at in total to see whether or not they, which ones may have met criteria of 1307.
We had a helper come in and say that a lot of the requirements that you need to know about your 5-year grant are all listed in the IM that was recently posted. So I recommend that folks go onto eClick and look up that IM and see if that fits your needs. And if it doesn't, you can always ask your regional office for more instruction. And I do like that I'm so popular with the 3-year reviews. It's just awesome that people just want to know about that. And so as I stated earlier, we'll provide some written guidance to grantees about your reviews and when they'll actually happen.
There's a question that is actually probably a very logical question, which is, will the question and answers also be available on eClick? I assume it's a question and answers from this webinar. Anyone want to take a shot at that?
Jen, our technical assistant, is shaking her head yes. So typically Jen is actually typing down the answers to our questions, and we try to make as many of them available as we can.
And that would be, how long would you expect? Within a couple weeks?
Within a couple weeks. Yep.
So within a couple weeks, we should have the questions and responses up on eClick.
As well as the PowerPoint slides and the link to the recording.
Okay. Thank you.
Someone says they are the executive director but did not get the notification of the audit webinar. Is there another way to receive this invitation? I would suggest that you contact your assigned regional office staff. They also received it and hopefully should be able to forward it to you.
We'll also be sending out another e-blast on that, but yes, you should check with your regional office.
And actually, that's a good reminder. The initial announcement that went out was just that, an announcement. It did not include a registration link at that time, but a subsequent blast will include more information.
One of the questions says, programs will only submit grant paperwork every 5 years, thank you, or will the self-assessment, community assessment, technical assistance, or et cetera still be submitted each year? I'm going to take a stab at it, but folks are going to help me with that one. I see Ross is shaking his head one way, and so I'm going to give him an opportunity.
Yeah. You will have to submit a grant every year, a grant application every year in order to receive funding. But the things like the community assessment is still looked at as once every 3 years. We're exploring the possibility of seeing if there can be changes on that to be more in line with the project period, but right now that's it's still required once every 3 years. Self-assessment is required every year, and that's critical. It's actually going to be one of the things that we will look more closely at during the grant application process, because we want to know what is the program, the grantee, the governing body, the policy council, or when I say governing body, also tribal council, policy council and management. What are you identifying as your own areas that need to be worked on to be in compliance or to be strengthened? And the more that a grantee is able to do an in-depth self-assessment that includes policy council, governing bodies, others, community members, whatever, that where you're more on a continuous improvement cycle, those I think will be very beneficial to helping the regional office understand not only what areas may not be or may need to be strengthened, but also what areas you're considering strengths and best practices. Oftentimes we look at where a program needs to improve, which is important, but it's just as important to know where programs, where their strengths are and what works well. So yes, the self-assessment will be required annually and will still be part of submitting the for those areas that need improvement, an improvement plan as part of the grant application.
There's some pretty easy questions here. So can we get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation? Absolutely. You guys are all going to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation because it's going to be posted on eClick. So just look for it there and you will get that copy. We're happy to provide it for you. The next question is, how do you sign up for eBlast? That's a really good question. If you go onto eClick, there is a place where you can go. It's the What's New page. If you sign up for What's New alerts, it gives you the option to sign up for newsletters, What's New, and a variety of other eBlasts from the Office of Head Start. So go to eClick and you'll be able to find those things there.
Somebody is mentioning that going on eClick now, when you click on the Governance, Leadership, and Oversight screener, it brings you to the Health and Safety screener instead. Our friends at HSICC who do the posting are also listening, and I'm sure that they will address that very quickly.
This is an interesting question. We have an existing 3-year grant, and we're just awarded a 5-year grant for extra slots. Do we perform these meetings, webinars, screenings, tools for the new slots only? It kind of, your program as a whole, so it's really difficult to just do something for just the new slots. And the tools that we're providing for you to do, they're really useful for your entire program. So things like the health and safety screening, you wouldn't want to make sure that it was only safe for the new slots of children that were in your program. You want to make sure that it's safe for all. Same thing with governance. If you've got, governance is sort of program-wide, and these are new tools and new opportunities for you. So I would think that I would recommend and highly recommend that you use it for your entire program, and it's really difficult to kind of separate things into new slots unless you had So my answer is it's for your entire program. There's one question here that's kind of hard. It says, if you're with a school board and they are your grantee and the school board audit conducts the auditor conducts the audit, what should we do? Well, there's so many people who want to answer.
Yeah, everybody wants to answer.
I just read the question, so I'll pass it along.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that question pertains to the audit webinar and who should participate. And I would suggest the more the merrier in terms of everyone who is involved having the information about the requirements, the benefits, and the pitfalls to be avoided. So, if folks who are with the school board, with the Head Start program within the school board, and also if you have an ongoing relationship with an auditor, as many of those folks as possible should participate in the webinar.
Again, the intended audiences, which was mentioned on one of the earlier slides, is the grantee agency, governing body members, executive staff, program, and fiscal specialists.
There's some questions on here that we need some helpers for. I don't know that we're necessarily going to get those helpers, but I know that they're listening. And so if they have the answers, it would be useful. One of them is, when will our new grant number be available on HSES to enter program information? So we have some helpers on the line that can who may come in the room and help out with that. I'm reading the questions because I want folks to understand that we do see your questions and that we plan on addressing them. If we get someone to come in, they'll give us an answer for that one. There's some other ones that also relate to things like that. I have to find them, but I will read your question and let you know that we do see it. And if we get some folks to come in and give us an answer, we will provide it on this call. And if not, we'll provide it on eClick with the other answers.
There's one that I think was in response to something I might have said, which is, you stated that the self-assessment is to be done every year. Should that submission date be the same each year? It's up to individual grantees to determine when they do their self-assessment. What we expect is that if in doing your self-assessment you've identified items that need improvement, that how you address that should be included as part of the grant application. But that when a self-assessment gets done, for instance, and I'm only picking this purely as an example, if you've done your if your grant year is February 1, but typically you do your self-assessment in May or June, which winds down what is often a school year, then you don't have to change when you do your self-assessment to match your grant year.
I see the other question that needs to be read, but we need we'll need someone to come in. It says, when do you plan to distribute the startup funds? That's a very good question. We have other folks who are here at the Office of Head Start but are listening in. And if they come in, they'll let us know what the answer is, and if not, we'll put it on eClick.
Yeah.
Ross, did you know?
Well, it's also one that you probably need to connect with your regional office on. Okay. They will probably have more of accurate information.
There's one question that I've been looking at for a while in the chat box, but I'm not really clear on what the person is asking. So I'm going to read the question, and if that person can maybe try again. It says, we are due for our on-site monitoring review this fall. Will we be completing our on-site review for results to determine then at that time for us to receive our funding letter? I think what the person may be asking is, do the results of the on-site monitoring review determine whether or not you need to compete or whether or not you'll go for automatic renewal? And if that's your question, there's many factors that are included in that. One of them is the on-site monitoring review, another is class, but the other things can be things like summary suspension or license revocation. So they all work together to determine whether or not you'll receive automatic funding or whether or not you'll go into the designation renewal pool. But if I didn't get your answer correct or your question right, please resubmit it.
Well, we're at about the end of our time, and there are lots of questions still up there. We addressed some that many that were related to the NOA, that the Notice of Award, those conditions that this webinar was intended to address, some that were more for clarification. But I would encourage that, again, you continue to submit questions, be in contact with your regional offices. We will certainly, as identified, get the questions and PowerPoint and questions and answers and PowerPoint up on eClick within the next couple weeks. But hopefully this webinar has been helpful to you. As I said, it will be one of several that we will be rolling out as programs are entering into the 5-year project period, because we are looking at ongoing oversight as key at both the local, regional, and national levels, and so we'll be planning webinars around that. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you have a good rest of the afternoon, or for the West Coast, a good beginning of the afternoon. Thank you very much.